All right, group. This is the single subject method presentation. I'm Christina Merschel, and then Monta Johnson is the partner. I'll be presenting. If you can't access the links when we put them on the bottom of the document area, we're going to also try to submit the PowerPoint as a PowerPoint itself so that you can click on the links and it can be interactive. Unfortunately, I have this new TV, and so the computer that's recording is trying to adjust based on this and me, and so it's having a little issues. So I've tried to fix it, and this is about what I got. So hopefully you can follow along without too much trouble. And if I need to re-record, I will try to do that again for you guys. All right, so the primary goal of the single subject design is used to show if a treatment is effective. Okay, so it's not really used to compare groups of people. It's used to see if a treatment works or doesn't work. Effective treatments must be replicated across individuals, not groups. So that means that I might try a particular treatment for a student A, it works, then I try the same treatment for student B, and it doesn't work. Okay, so therefore it wouldn't be replicated across. I would need to try to see if it worked for more students. I would either adjust my treatment based on it not working or continue the treatments to see if it continues to work for other students. These also include a pre-test / post-test design, and results are analyzed to determine the effectiveness of the treatment. Your pre-test is a baseline, is what it's called. So you want to count the number of times something happens, whatever behavior you're trying to modify, and then you're going to provide the treatment and count again. Okay. The sampling approach, I'm going to let you read that for a second. So the single subject research is quantitative research of individuals, but maybe in small groups. So you're not sitting there asking the students how they feel or how they perceive their behavior. You're simply saying, this is what I'm looking for. You're counting it every time it happens with like little tally marks, and you're recording that data. So it is a numbers-based type of approach. Usually an intervention is wanting to be measured. Okay, and it could be a positive intervention or a negative intervention. It requires multiple measures to be taken across different points in time. For instance, if you're trying to track a student's behavior, you're going to check it for a whole week to get your baseline, and then you're going to track it for another week to see if it improved based on whatever kind of treatment you're providing, and then you may do it again. It's usually not just a one-day thing. That wouldn't be enough to see a kind of a trend over time. Okay. Usually this is typical of psychology types of behaviors. There you go. So the single subject design and action, the example that we have for you today is investigating the effect of praise on reducing disruptive behavior. So first you're going to establish a All right, so first you're going to establish a frequency baseline to find a consistent pattern. So say you were tracking a student in math class. You want to track them for multiple days to see if a pattern exists. If on Mondays and Wednesdays there's nothing, but on Tuesdays and Thursdays something skyrockets, that might be a signal. But say it's randomly at like 5 times the behavior happens one day, then once, then 3 times, then 2, then 7, and you can't find a trend, you may have to reevaluate what you're looking for to get your baseline. Okay. Then during the implementation, you're going to plot the frequency of your data. And one thing I really like about this is that a lot of the examples I found went back to a non-treatment. So they were trying to see if perhaps just natural changes in students' behavior, or perhaps the weather, you know how full moons are, or students who may have just naturally grown because they're seeing a therapist or something had happened in their life and that was traumatic, and maybe now they have received services for that would have impacted the behavior. So when you do this, you do a treatment, you do a baseline, then you do a treatment, then you do the non-treatment to see if the treatment was actually what helped you to improve whatever you're looking for. So this is an example of what you might see, typical of this type of design. So here's the baseline, okay? They found that the frequency of disruptions was 6 and 7 over a 3-day period. Then they provided praise to the students. And for these days, as you can see in the beginning, it kind of went up, but then it went down and it stayed down. So that might show you that the praise was working. However, they then went to a non-treatment again, and you can see that when they didn't have praise for the student, the disruptive behaviors increased. Now it looks like they did not increase as much as the original one, so maybe it did do something for the student's overall behavior, but clearly praise did reduce the student's disruptions. Okay, these are some more examples of what you might see in this type of data sample. This is a P&D method. Okay, so what they've done is they've found, let me step out so you can see a little better. They found a baseline here, and so they decided the baseline number was 10. Okay, all right, sorry, the number of in the sample was 10, but this is their baseline. Then they draw it across, because then you can visually see if it went above the baseline or below. And depending on what you're looking for, you may want to increase the number of times something happens, as opposed to the previous slide where we wanted to decrease the number of times it happens. It just depends on what you're trying to study. Okay. Over here is a similar type of example where it was low, kind of a little bit more sporadic. It gets higher and then it gets lower. I do prefer when you have the numbers on the bars. It makes it easier to read because you never know how somebody is counting. Okay, on this slide, there's a few critical points to point out. That if you are doing the sampling technique, that when you are giving somebody your data, you would need to have all of these key points on here. So you have your independent measures and your dependent measures, okay? You need to have the unit of time and the measurement of time, so is this over days or weeks or class periods, okay? You have a baseline data first, and then you have a condition change line. So we saw this in the first one, there's just a vertical line here that says that that was one part of the data, then here's the next, and if you went again into a non-treatment, you would have another vertical line. The data points are usually points connected by lines called the data path. It's easier kind of to see the trends of the points as you connect them. Oh, also at the top is where the condition identifications are, so you know what's happening in each section. And again, it has to start with the baseline, then your treatment. So some of the other examples that we saw in research that might influence your practices would be, does music influence student speed in problem solving? So they first gave a student an assessment, saw how fast they solved problems, then they played music to see how fast they would solve the problems, then stop the music to see how fast they solve the problems, to see if indeed music did help students. Okay. We also often saw with modifying behavior, so students with IEPs, keep the students on task, and we were thinking it could be used for PBIS. It's not exactly student specific, but it would be the same kind of thing where you're counting the data, you perform a treatment like everybody in first hour gets points if they're here on time, and see if that improves it. Although that might be effective as part of this kind of sample if it was maybe 1 or 2 kids that you picked to set on, and maybe they were chronically absent students, wanted to see if the treatment was working for them, or if it was helping regular kids who were kind of sort of late to first hour. So there's some alternatives to single subjects that we found. So some groups believe that having a control group and a treatment group could harm participants.
What that means is that because this is used for a lot of students who are having special needs, that if you were to deny them services during like non-treat times, that may impact learning or health. So you need to be careful about who you're treatment to or not. And that has to do with a control group. They receive no assistance, so if that were a longer period of time, those students would really be at service compared to the students who are receiving the treatment. And so I don't want to go with that, so instead they go with the same subject. Also, this is an issue at some schools that you may not have children to participate. If they have special needs or categories of people you're trying to target those subjects, would work better because you only have students that need to receive assistance. So under review through single subject, we have reading interventions, special education, enrichment techniques, instructions for L1 for ELs, non-ELE subject, inclusion of ELs in mainstream classrooms. We have positive interventions for student behaviors, energy use, and the student achievement. Again, if you can't read the, we will attach the PowerPoint. Okay, so what you to do is go to Padlet. Okay, again, if you want to click the link to participate, you can access that PowerPoint. Like topics would you like to research or read more about through the research map? Click on the Padlet link, post at least one idea or interest you. And then we have a quiz. Test your knowledge here. It's as follows to look into the applicant features of single subject research design practice plus yourself. Feel free to share your in your presentation comment. And so go through see if we've explained everything knowledge would be on the topic of single subject design. Thank you. Be sure to put questions and comments in the discussion required as part of this presentation and try to respond to all of your questions as soon as possible. Thank